Good evening. Welcome to the Bible studies of Banking Blessings Ministry. We are coming to you from the sanctuary of the Throne of Grace Church, right here in San Antonio. Today we'll go back to our study of the life of Jacob under the Famous Family series. We started the Famous Family series by looking at the birth of Jacob, the life of Jacob from his birth to his interaction with Esau regarding the blessing, the time that Isaac blessed Jacob even though he was intending to bless Esau. But we had to go back to look at the marriage of their parents, Rebekah and Isaac. So today we come back. Jacob has been blessed by Isaac, and Esau is really mad because he believed that Jacob stole blessing that was intended for him. That is where we rejoin their life as we look at Jacob's movement from relocation from Canaan, where he used to live, to Paddan Aram, to live with his uncle. We will learn about Jacob's departure from Canaan. We will look at the circumstances surrounding the departure, because Esau threatened Jacob, and Rebekah managed the situation to convince Isaac to send Jacob to Paddan Aram. A very important incident that occurred in Jacob's journey was the covenant at Bethel, where Jacob had a dream and God appeared to him and reiterated to him the promise that he made to Abraham. And then when Jacob got to Paddan Aram, the first person he met was Rachel, who he eventually married. So we'll look into how that happened. All of the things we'll study today are from Genesis chapters 27, 28, and 29. We will also step back and look at a few selected verses from chapter 12 and chapter 26 that are relevant to what happened in this chapter. We will start with Jacob's departure. This is recorded in Genesis 27 verses 41 to 45, which we're going to read. Yes, Genesis 27 verses 41 to 45.
So Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing that his father had given him. Esau said to himself, The time to mourn for my father is near. Then I'll kill my brother Jacob. When Rebekah was told what her oldest son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, Watch out, your brother Esau is comforting himself by planning to kill you. So now, son, obey me. Quick, run away to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him a while until your brother's anger cools down. When your brother's anger is gone and he has forgotten what you did to him, I'll send for you and get you back. Why should I lose both of you in one day? Rebekah said to Isaac, I can't stand Hittite women. If Jacob marries a Hittite woman like one of those from around here, I might as well die.
Was that verse 45? Or did you go
46.
over? We went over.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. We'll read it again. It's not nothing lost. But what we find here is Esau was mad with Jacob. He just said, look, this is not over. I'm going to wait. Our father is going to die soon, and once he dies and we finish mourning him, I will kill Jacob. He was determined about that, and he mentioned it to some people, and Rebekah was informed about it. So Rebekah didn't want that to happen. She didn't want to wait to see what will happen. So she called Jacob and said, look, I want you to go to my brother Laban in Haran, go and stay there, and when things cool down, I'll tell you to come back. But for now, get out of the way, because your brother is threatening to kill you, and I don't want to lose both of you at the same time. Of course, Rebekah recognized that she didn't have authority to send their son away. That authority resided with their father, Isaac. And we'll look at how we'll look at how she convinced Isaac to have Jacob go out. Well, she realized that, and this is not in the Bible, this is just thinking what may have happened here. She felt that probably Isaac wouldn't accept that his two sons were at such bad terms with each other that one was going to kill the other. He probably would want to handle it another way. But Rebekah didn't want to bring that up. But at the same time, she wanted Isaac to agree to let Jacob move to Paddan Aram. So she found a way. Let us read that in Genesis 27, verse 46, and 28, verses 1 to 5. Go see, read.
And Rebekah said to Isaac, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob take a wife of the daughters of Heth, such as these, which are the daughters of the land, what good shall do my life? And Isaac called Jacob, and blessed him, and charged him, and said unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Paddan Aram, to the house of Bethel, thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother. And God Almighty bless thee, and make thee fruitful, and multiply. Thou shalt mayest be the multitude of people, and give thee the blessings of Abraham to thee and to thy seed with thee. And thou mayest inherit the land wherein thou art a stranger, which God gave unto Abraham.
Well, so Rebekah went to Isaac and said, look, I don't like this. I don't want any chance of Jacob marrying from among these Hittite women. Remember, when Isaac wanted to marry, his father Abraham sent somebody, one of his servants, to Paddan Aram to get a wife, to get Rebekah for Isaac. So that is still with both of them, and they believed, she talked to Isaac and said, look, let's not take a chance. If we leave Jacob here, he's a young man, he's going to fall in love with one of these women and marry them. So Isaac agreed, called Jacob, and he told Jacob, don't marry a Canaanite woman. Don't even try it. It's not good. He must have told Jacob a lot of things about these people. Then he said, okay, go to Paddan Aram. Your uncle Laban has daughters. Go and marry from among his daughters. So Isaac sent Jacob away, blessed him, and sent him away to Paddan Aram. And in his mind, the reason for that was so that he will marry from Paddan Aram and will not have a chance of marrying from Canaan. Rebekah knows that, Rebekah agrees with that reason. That is also true. But she knows there is another reason, but she didn't bring that up. Well, before we proceed with reading, let us look at these things. There's so much to discuss here that we don't need to wait till the end before we discuss it. First of all, Esau was mad with Jacob because he believed that Jacob stole his blessing. The truth is, Jacob deceived his father and take blessing that his father was going to confer on Esau. But the truth really is the blessing was meant for Jacob, as we saw when we studied this in the first lesson under this series. The blessing was meant to Jacob. God had told Rebekah in a dream No, well, Rebekah went and inquired of God what was happening. The children in his tummy were very active and very restless. In fact, they were fighting each other. So God told her that the children will become two nations, and they will be separated, and that the older will serve the younger, which to Rebekah meant that blessing, the blessing that was conferment of Abraham, God's promise to Abraham on a member of their family, belonged to Jacob and not Esau. Isaac thought that since Esau was the senior son, that it should pass to him. Rebekah knew, based on her encounter with God, that Isaac was going to make a mistake. So she connived with Jacob and redirected Isaac to confer the blessing on Jacob. So the blessing belonged to Jacob. Jacob, sort of took it away from Esau. But Esau really was wrong in saying that Jacob stole his blessing and threatening to kill him because of that. Of course, they didn't know. Esau didn't know this, and I don't think Jacob knew it either. So, but we know today that Jacob did not steal Esau's blessing. What about the interaction between Rebekah and Isaac? When I look at this, I think it's a masterpiece in spousal diplomacy of some kind. And that is, the woman needed to convince her husband to send one of their sons away. Now, she had two reasons. The primary reason on her mind was the quarrel between Esau and Jacob, the fact that Esau was threatening to kill Jacob. But she did not think that her husband would be swayed by that argument. Her husband would probably want to handle it in a different way. He probably didn't want one son running from the other. So she knew that if she based it on that, she would probably not be able to convince her husband. So she brought up a case, something that they both agreed on, and something that was true. And that is, they both agreed that their children should not marry from among the Canaanites. In fact, later on, where this is not part of our study, I'd just like to mention that when Esau realized this, that their parents didn't want them to marry from the Canaanites, he went and married two women from the Canaanites. But Jacob, anyway, had not married, and they didn't want that to happen. So Rebekah used this to convince her husband. She used something that they both agreed on to convince her husband to send Jacob away, and did not bother bringing up the other reason that she had, which wasn't necessary because her husband has already agreed to send Jacob away. So it's a way of, I call it selective persuasion, that is using using a reason that will succeed, provided it is true. And in this case, it was true, so she used it. And of course, Isaac exercised the household authority that belongs to him. He was the person that made the decision for Jacob to go away. Rebekah got what she wanted. Isaac got what she wanted, and they were both happy. So the woman did her job. Now, so Jacob left. After they had agreed he should leave, he left. On the way, he had an important encounter with God. That will be the next thing we are going to focus on in our study. Let us take a look at the passage. Is a bit long, so I've divided it into two. Adugo, you read Genesis 28, verses 10 to 12, and Amanda, you read verses 13 to 15. Genesis 28.
And Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he lighted upon a certain place, and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took up the stones of that place, and put them for his pillows, and lay in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it.
13 to 15.
And it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house.
Amen.
Amanda, wait.
Right now. 28.
It's okay. Go to, are you in the right chapter? Go to Genesis 28, verses 13 to 15.
She was reading 29.
And she's reading 29.
Okay.
Oh, you found 28? Okay, go ahead, 13 to 15.
And behold, the Lord stood above it, and said, I am the Lord, God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land. For I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of.
Okay, so God appeared to Jacob in a dream at a place called Luz, and after the encounter with God, Jacob renamed the place Bethel. So the covenant that God made with Jacob at this place is popularly known as the covenant at Bethel, or the Bethel covenant. In fact, there is a church in San Antonio known as Bethel Covenant Assembly. They took their name, I believe, from the Bethel covenant. That is just to tell you how important this incident is. And as we go through it today, we'll emphasize why it is important. What happened there was God appeared to Jacob and reiterated the promise that he made to Abraham earlier. He made this promise to Abraham, repeated it to Isaac, and then here he repeated it to Jacob. And the promise had actually three components. Initially it was three components, but with Jacob, God added the fourth component. The components are that you and your descendants will own the land on which you lie. I will give you ownership of this land. Then your descendants will be innumerable. He said they will expand to the east, to the west, and will be like the dust of the sea. I mean, the dust of the earth. So that is uncountable. Then another important point is that all people on earth will be blessed through his offspring. Then he promised Jacob protection. He said, wherever you go, I will be with you. I'll take you where you are going, and I will bring you back. Now let us look at the promise to Jacob, to Abraham, and the promise to Isaac, just to see that that is the same promise that was repeated to Jacob. So that with the background of this encounter with God will be clear to us. God promised Abraham, made promises to Abraham. This promise was propagated to Isaac and then propagated to Jacob, because the promise by itself would not have been meaningful to Abraham alone. It has to be something that will come through in future generations of his offspring. No, I think I passed. Okay, I did it. So let us look at Genesis 12, verse 2 to 3. Genesis 12, verse 2 to 3, that's God's promise to Abraham. And then you are going to read Genesis 26, verses 2 to 4.
And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curseth thee. and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed.
Through you that all people of the earth shall be blessed. All families of the earth?
It says here, thou shall all families of the earth be blessed.
That's it. All families, all people of the earth will be blessed. Okay. The same promise was repeated to Isaac in Genesis 26, verses 2 to 4.
The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Settle down in the land that I will point out to you. Stay in this land, then I will be with you and will bless you. For I will give all these lands to you and to your descendants, and I will fulfill the solemn promise I made to your father Abraham. I will multiply your descendants so that they will be as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give them all these lands. All the nations of the earth will pronounce blessings on one another using the name of your descendants."
This is wonderful. It's three parts of the promise. I'll give you this land, your descendants will be innumerable, and all people on earth will be blessed. And here he spelled it out even more. He said, all people will bless each other through the name of your offspring. And who was that offspring? Who did that offspring turn out to be?
Jacob.
Christ.
Oh.
Christ. Yeah, it's an offspring of these people, believe it or not. We are going to get to that at some point. Yes. So this is the promise that the birth of Christ was in fact a fulfillment of the promise that God made to Abraham several generations before. Okay. Well, after God appeared to Jacob and made the promises to him, the following morning when Jacob woke up, he realized what happened. He said, "Oh, this is the house of God." Then he made vows to God. That before we do that, I missed the reading. I didn't indicate the reading.
It was one before that one. No, it's okay. The slide right before that.
No. I just didn't indicate the reading here. It's
16 to 20.
Yeah, 16 to 22. Why don't you read it?
Okay.
Genesis 28.
16 to 20.
16 to 22. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Then Jacob woke up from his sleep and exclaimed, "Certainly the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know it." Filled with awe, he said, "How awe-inspiring this place is. Certainly this is the house of God and the gateway to heaven." Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had put under his head. He set it up as a marker and poured olive oil on top of it. He named that place Bethel, house of God. Previously, the name of the city was Luz. Then Jacob made a vow. "If God will be with me and will watch over me on my trip and give me food to eat and clothes to wear, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will be my God. This stone that I have set up as a marker will be the house of God, and I will surely give you a tenth of everything you give me."
Yes. Jacob made an important vow after he woke up from the dream. Remember, God's appearance to him was actually a dream. But when he woke up, he realized what has happened. He said, "This is the house of God," even though it was wilderness. So he renamed it Bethel and said that he will come back there and build a house. But he asked God, he said, "God, if you will give me my basic needs," and he mentioned the basic needs by name. He said, food, clothing, shelter, and protection. I added drink, because there are 5 basic needs. He mentioned 4 of them. He didn't mention drink specifically because I believe he considered drink to be part of food. But these are the same 5 basic needs that we talked about in the Banking Blessings series. And here today we see Jacob. Actually, this is what he asked of God. He said, if you give me these basic needs, food and drink, clothing, a place to live and shelter, and you protect me, then you will be my God, which means I will worship you, and I'll build a house for you here, and of everything you give me, I'll give you back a tenth. Now, the 5 basic needs, you remember where we encountered them before? It was when we discussed the parable of the sheep and goat, and Christ was telling us that if you provide any of these needs to somebody, that you have provided them to him, and that you will be blessed. I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was a stranger and you invited me in, and all those things. So, and we looked at them, we saw that there are 5 basic things there: food, drink, clothing, shelter, and protection. This is the same thing. This is the same thing that Jacob asked of Christ. Of God, of course, Christ. He said, if you do this for me, then I will worship you. You will be my God. Now, if it was just for Jacob, it's really unimportant to him, and it wouldn't be that important to God, because Jacob, after all, is just one person. Okay, and his lifespan is limited like the lifespan of every person. So Jacob was making this promise, making this vow on behalf of himself, his offsprings, and on behalf of all humanity, because all humanity are beneficiaries of God's promise to Jacob through his offspring. Remember when God said, all people on earth will be blessed through your offspring. So the vow that Jacob made at Bethel, he made on behalf of himself and on behalf of his offspring. And because we are connected to that promise through his offsprings, then he made that vow on behalf of all people. And this is why the covenant at Bethel, the Bethel covenant as it's called, is a very important occurrence in Christianity. It's not too different from the promise that God made to Abraham, except that here Jacob promised something to God in return, and that promise was made on our behalf. That really is the beginning of Christianity. Then Jacob, after this encounter, he got up and continued on his journey. He got to the first place he arrived. Remember, he was going to Paddan Aram, but a particular place called Haran. The first place he arrived was a gathering place for shepherds, where shepherds come. There is a well there. They have their sheep wet there until at some point they will all uncover the well. It was covered with a big stone. And then once it's uncovered, they will water their sheep, and then they go back to their wherever they feed their sheep. So that is the first place that Jacob arrived. Let us see what happened there when he arrived. I think you are supposed to read, Amanda. Genesis 29, 1-6. We changed things around a little bit, but that's okay.
Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place. And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said unto them, Now ye Laban, the son of Nahor. And they said, We know him. And he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He is well. And behold, Rachel his daughter cometh with the sheep.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that happened. I mean, in our place, you know, we by that we traveled mostly by foot. Of course, things have changed now. Many young people of today don't even know that you go anywhere on foot. But we went miles on foot. And usually you come out to a stream, and that's the first one of the resting places. You come to a stream, drink water at times, have a bath or things like that. That's exactly the kind of thing that happened here. He came to a well, a gathering place, and there the shepherds were waiting. Then he asked them, you know, where do you come from? Because he still didn't know how close he was to where he was going. Where do you come from? They said, we are from Haran, which was good news for him because that's where he was going. And then he asked them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor, I think? And yeah, they said, yes, we know him. In fact, there comes his daughter, because Rachel was coming with the sheep. I think I jumped something. So Jacob arrived, then he immediately went to Rachel and introduced himself as a relative of his father's. He said, remember, Rebekah, the mother of Jacob, is the sister of Laban. And here was Jacob talking to Rachel, Laban's daughter. So it was like coming home, and for both of them, in fact. They've never met each other. So Jacob explained to her that he is a relative of her father's. Let us read this in Genesis 29, verses 7 to 14. Genesis 29, you go ahead.
Then Jacob said, Since it is still the middle of the day, it is not time for the flocks to be gathered. You should water the sheep and then go and let them graze some more. We can't, they said, until all the flocks are gathered and the stone is rolled off the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel arrived with her father's sheep, for she was tending them. When Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of his uncle Laban, and the sheep of his uncle Laban, he went over and rolled the stone off the mouth of the well and watered the sheep of his uncle Laban.
Yeah, so, he realizing this was a momentous meeting, really. He was meeting his niece or cousin. They were related. So he went to Rachel and said, my mother and your father are from the same mom. Your father is my mother's brother. Mm-hmm. So he felt a closeness to Rachel. And not only to Rachel, also to the responsibility. He felt a responsibility for the sheep. So he didn't mind that the other people were waiting. He opened the well, took out the rock that they used as a cover for the well. He removed it and then watered the sheep. Then after that, Rachel ran home. If she couldn't contain herself, she ran home, called her father and said, your sister's brother is at the well. So Laban went back with Rachel, met Jacob, and looked at Jacob and took him home and said, you are my flesh and blood. Did we read that?
No.
We stopped at 14.
I didn't get to finish.
You started talking.
I thought you finished.
It's okay.
Okay, read. Where did you stop? Start from where you stopped and read to the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep loudly. When Jacob explained to Rachel that he was a relative of her father and the son of Rebekah, she ran and told her father. When Laban heard this news about Jacob, his sister's son, he rushed out to meet him. He He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Jacob told Laban how he was related to him. Then Laban said to him, "You are indeed my own flesh and blood." So Jacob stayed with him for a month.
Yes. He said, "You are my flesh and blood." And then he said, "Okay, you can stay here. Don't worry. Stay as long as you wish." Jacob, the Bible said Jacob stayed a month. He actually stayed more than that, but it's a month is the free period. And in the next lesson, we will see what happened after that month, because some very interesting things began to happen in the life of Jacob. But yes, he was in their family as a visitor for 1 month, where he helped with whatever he could, but there was no formal arrangement as to how he would be paid or what he was supposed to do. He was just there, enjoying his uncle's house. Okay. There are a number of things we learned from today's lesson. It was a rather short lesson, but we learned a number of things. One of them is actually we learned two, in addition to the interaction between Rebekah and Isaac, which we discussed earlier and we are not going to discuss again. We also learn about functions of family. Remember, one of the reasons we are going through the famous family series is to try to understand some of the roles that family have played. And we see two of them today. One is a family being what I'll call a credo for self-determination. A family is what says who you are and where you come from. Remember when Jacob got to that stream, the first thing he asked those people is, "Where do you come from?" And of course, they mentioned that they came from Haran. And then he asked them about Laban. Laban found out that they know about Laban, because it is Laban's home that he's looking for. That is where he came. That is where his ancestors came from. That's where his mother came from. So he's looking for that home. It is his place of identification. I remember he identified Laban. When he asked for Laban, he said, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's son?" So the family of Nahor was what he used to identify Laban to these people. And then when Laban met him, Laban embraced him and said, "You are my flesh and blood," which means my home is your home. Wherever I am, if you get there, you are home. So one of the roles of a family, and we're going to see this more and more, is that a family sort of defines where somebody comes from. It defines who you are and defines where you come from. If there was no family, then each of us will be germinating as a mushroom somewhere, and you don't have a place to identify as your own. You just know, I used to live in San Antonio, now I live in Austin, that kind of thing, but where is your home? I don't know. So everybody comes from somewhere, and it is family that establishes that. Another important thing, remember Jacob's covenant. If it wasn't for family, there was no way that any one of us or any one of his children could claim any kind of special relationship with God because of that covenant. It is family that propagated that covenant to his offspring, and of course it is his offspring that propagated that covenant to the rest of humanity. Okay, so that is the end of today's Bible study. We are not done yet because we have time for questions and comments.
When Abraham had his blessing, Isaac had his blessing, couldn't they pass it down, keep on passing it down to the next generation and their sons?
But that's exactly what they did. God made the promise to Abraham. But when we read it, you see the promise was really for Abraham's offspring. And then later on, we didn't read that today, but later on, God told Abraham and said, this promise that I made to you will be propagated through your son, through a son that will come from you. Because at that time, Abraham had a son that he got through his maid servant or something, okay? And that was Ishmael. But Abraham wasn't happy about that. He said, I don't have what is going to happen with this? Will Ishmael be the person in whom this promise will be propagated? And God said, no, the promise will be propagated through a son that comes from you and your wife, Sarah. And he didn't believe it. Of course, within a short time, his wife, at the age of 100, I think, got pregnant and gave birth to Isaac. Then sometime, the other passage we read was sometime during the life of Isaac, there was something that was happening and people were moving to Egypt. And God told Isaac and said, don't go, stay where you are, I will bless you. Then he repeated the promise that he had made to his father Abraham. So yes, it was propagated. And then they remember it was propagating the conferment of that blessing on Jacob that created problem between Jacob and Esau, because Isaac wanted to confer the blessing on Esau, since Esau was his firstborn, but his wife Rebekah, based on her encounter with God, believed that the promise should be conferred on Jacob. So she deceived Isaac and redirected him into conferring the blessing on Jacob. Later on, God repeated that to Jacob on his way, which is another way of showing that when Isaac conferred the blessing on Jacob, he did not make a mistake. But if he made a mistake, God would have corrected the mistake. He would have found it, he wouldn't just go by a mistake. The mistake would have been if the promise was conferred on Esau. Does that answer your question? Good question, Amanda. Any question or comment?
I guess I was just thinking about how Rebekah and Isaac did not want their son Jacob to marry a Canaanite woman.
Yeah.
I guess were they like ungodly, or like they didn't serve the same God?
Well, they didn't really tell us why, but you remember this was one of the things we learned in the marriage of Rebekah and Isaac, because Abraham sent his servant because they were living in Canaan. He sent his servant back to Paddan Aram, say, look, go to my country and my relatives and get a wife for my son. Please do not get a wife for my son from among the Canaanite women. What I think is Abraham remembered the promise that God made to him, and believed that if he let Isaac marry somebody from among the Canaanites, and he has seen the worship habits of the Canaanites. They didn't really describe what it was, but I think they had a variable worship habit. Let's describe it that way. And he was concerned that if Isaac married one of these people, maybe God would not like the union and say, look, you people are not worthy of this promise anymore. That kind of thing. So for the Bible didn't explain this, but it appears to me that was the reason he sent his servants to go get wife from among his people, because he knew that his people worship God. Then I think that Rebekah and Isaac didn't want Jacob to marry from among Canaanites for the same reason. Yeah. Any other comment or question? Okay, well, it looks like we've come to the end of today's Bible study. We thank all those that will stop once or twice and take a look at these Bible studies, and we pray that you see something here that will make a positive impact on your life and bring you closer to God's purpose for your life. Thank you, and God bless you. Okay.